Hey there. Huh? We're lost.
Yeah, now you know how I've been feeling this whole time. Did anybody else at school have a Tetris phase? Because when I was in my junior and senior year, it seemed like that's what everyone had up on their computers. During the online classes, study hall periods, or just when the main classes were slow, there would be at least a few kids every day playing some third-party knockoff on a random Weebly site. Some would play together and compete for a higher score, and those who weren't playing were spectating the others who were, and bashing their skills whenever they messed up. It's hard to believe that such a basic game from the 80s would have that kind of hold on a generation 3.5 decades later, but that simplicity might just be what kept it alive for so long. It's easy to pick up, learn, and even master if you wanted to take your Tetris game to the next level. For some, however, simplicity was not enough. There have been plenty of Tetris games that try to put some kind of extra spin on the formula, putting in new block types, increasing the size of the existing block types, making the game 3D, turning every block into Elvis's face. There have been many versions of the original Tetris game, and while I could talk about a bunch of them, the one I want to focus on today is a game that's been on my radar for a while now, Puyo Puyo Tetris. Yeah, thank you. I remember seeing this game back in 2017 as a launch title for the Nintendo Switch, and while it looked alright, I didn't have a Switch at the time, none of the other launch titles interested me, and I wasn't gonna buy a whole console for one game, especially not this one. It also didn't help that the launch price was $30 for the digital game and $40 for the physical. That's quite a bit just to turn blocks into lines. Because of all these factors, Puyo Puyo Tetris ended up becoming a distant memory rather quickly. However, a few years have passed, and I ended up finding this game during a Steam sale. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but I probably didn't spend more than 10 bucks. So what exactly is Puyo Puyo Tetris? Well, it's a crossover between Tetris, of course, and another puzzle game called Puyo Puyo, which I never heard of prior to playing this, but essentially you match 4 of these colored blobs to make them disappear. Wow! There were plenty of changes made to the core gameplay that we'll mention later, but the game's main focus revolves around battling other players in your standard versus Tetris, and what I assume is your standard versus Puyo. To me, that sounds great. I love a good multiplayer party game as much as the next guy, and I'm ready. I have the game installed, I have my 4 controllers with me, and I have 0 friends to play it with. Not to worry though, the game does have a single player adventure mode for all the loners who bought this like myself, so let's see what that has to offer. The story begins with a girl named Ringo enjoying her day when all of a sudden her friends come back from another dimension after participating in an epic Puyo battle. And if it sounds like I'm glossing over some important details in the story, then you can imagine how confused I was playing this for the first time.
I think someone's bursting out of the sky!
What the fuck is going on? Now, I'm not exactly sure if I'm the one who's missing something here. I don't know if this is a direct follow-up to another game, or if I just have to be in the know of the Puyo-verse to truly get what's going on. But speaking as an outsider whose entryway to the franchise was this game, the plot is a mess and makes no sense. So from what I gathered, the interdimensional travel is just a way to get Ringo's friends into the story. They have idle chatter about Puyo life, I guess, and then Tetris blocks start destroying the city and our main characters get transported into a spaceship run by Tetris players. I think the story's biggest issue is that it has no real consistent flow. See, everything I just mentioned happens within the span of around 5 minutes, but after that the story kind of meanders for another 30 or so, and solely exists just to introduce us to more characters. Normally that wouldn't be a problem, but 1, going from all the crazy science fiction shenanigans to this was quite a whiplash. 2, the workings of the universe barely get any sort of fleshing out, thus further increasing my confusion. 3, by the end of Act 1 a total of 11 characters are introduced, which is a lot of personalities to cram in a short time. And 4, the characters are one-dimensional and not super compelling. Like, yeah, there are some personalities in there. J and L are your basic mischievous kids, I is the easily startled brains of the group, O is obsessed with the latest episode of South Park, and S is the actual worst. There just aren't any characters that I connect with or care about. They kind of exist and do things while I watch, sort of attentively, on my laptop monitor. The game is fully voice acted, which is nice. I think the actors do a good job with what they're given, but one minor complaint I have is that there is an autoplay button, but it doesn't stay activated. You have to keep turning it back on whenever you enter a new cutscene, which gets pretty tedious. And on the subject of the game's audio, I also have to compliment the soundtrack. I've always enjoyed Sega's electronic sound, and this game fits in perfectly with some of my favorites from them. That said, the music sometimes doesn't fit well with whatever's going on during the cutscenes.
S, did it ever cross your mind?
I can't be everywhere!
What did you just say?
Anyways, Tetris and later Puyo are essentially used as context-sensitive plot devices that solve everyone's problems, such as calming down the startled dog, clearing a virus on the ship, and fighting brainwashed anime girls later on. However, it's also commonly used for absolutely nothing. The setup for a good amount of the challenges essentially boil down to, I challenge you because it's been a couple of minutes and we need to get some form of gameplay in here eventually, so... Kya. Simply put, it's not the story that's gonna sell me on this mode, so let's check out how it actually plays.
Puyo Puyo Tetris!
One thing I want to let you all know is that Tetris has never been one of my crowning talents. Even when I played a lot of Tetris 99, I almost never got in the top 10, so don't expect my footage to show off any impressive T-spins or any T-spins for that matter. My Tetris skills are downright basic and competent. For someone as boringly average at Tetris as I am, however, the game is actually pretty easy. For the first couple challenges, all you're really doing is just playing a couple rounds of Battle Tetris with the AI. Simple, but... okay, it's a tad monotonous, but I think that's more of a problem with my skill level than a fundamental issue with the game. I will say, however, that it would have been nice to have a little more variety than just speeding through several games of Tetris. The campaign mode also has challenges with specific win conditions sprinkled in, like getting a certain score or a specific amount of lines before time runs out, but that really boils down to mindlessly playing Tetris until it's over as well. It wasn't until the last quarter of Act 1 that Puyo finally became introduced, and while it was nice to finally have a change of pace for once, the rest of the act was then nothing but Puyo battles. Fortunately, it's a lot easier to rack up combos in Puyo, making the game go by faster, but I think they could have done a better job at diversifying the games. Oh well, at least the monotony is only an issue for Act 1. Once we get to the next part, the game does a much better job at alternating between game modes, and even introduces a new one into the mix. Swap mode is where you play both a game of Puyo and Tetris back to back. You start with one game, and after a certain amount of time, you switch to the other, and you keep going back and forth until someone loses one of the boards. This is easily my favorite mode in the whole game, because it really keeps you on your toes, and it's always fun when the mode swap and you either get a feeling of extreme relief or intense anxiety. Despite all the new features and improvements though, the adventure mode is still bogged down by two things. One, the plot is still bad. The last act concludes with the Tetris People's space station getting destroyed and crash landing on the Puyo's planet. You think that this chapter would be spent fixing the ship, but instead the crew gets scattered around town and we spend the chapter tracking them down. Riveting. And it's not like the characters become any more interesting. We see I's Frightenstick again, L and J are still brats, and S has not become any less unbearable.
We didn't meet S's dad, did we? He has a big round body and an even bigger heart. Huh? You mean Zed? My papa.
Oh, I guess they did introduce that, so... worth? And if you thought we didn't have enough characters, we got 5 new ones. I want to say the bear's my favorite, but that might just be his voice actor.
Why, hello there, Ringo.
What are you thinking about?
Well, I saw something most unconventional over there.
The second remaining problem with the campaign mode is that we're still on the tedious difficulty, and by that I mean the game is easy, but challenging enough for the game to drag out. For a lot of the time, I was hardly engaged with the puzzle, and just going through the motions until it was over. The clear conditions do indicate that it can be done faster than what I've been able to do, but would that really make the experience better? I guess it would be nice to hear a lot less of every single round, but that wouldn't fix the game being too easy, and I can't say that an extra star is a super enticing reward. Overall, the adventure mode has some good ideas, but is bogged down by having too easy of a difficulty, and that is my verdict for the first 2 chapters. I have no idea what happened, but once I got to Act 3, the game's difficulty was dialed up very suddenly and very drastically. This became apparent with the introduction of Big Bang mode, which focuses more on making bigger and faster combo chains than your opponent. With Tetris mode it wasn't too bad, but I could not figure out Puyo for the life of me. And after I was hyping up my Puyo skills, losing to S 4 times in this mode did bruise my ego a bit. Even with the following match that I did beat first try, the game lasted for a very long time before I was even able to take out my opponent's last sliver of health. And don't even get me started on the item battles. I'm kinda skipping into Act 4 to talk about this, but don't worry about the plot, it's still...
Rulu loves the Dark Prince! Rulu loves the Dark Prince!
business as usual. Anyways, the 2 differences in this mode are that instead of outlasting your opponent, the goal is to get a higher score within a certain time limit, and also there are items, and these items are a goddamn pain. Oh, but you can use them against your opponent as well and hinder them. I think. Yeah, call me a skeptic, but I find it very hard to believe the AI gets affected by any of the hazards I throw their way. So they get to play a nice peaceful game, meanwhile I get bombarded with ice, this dangling light, and speed up nonsense. I hate this mode. Maybe it wouldn't be too bad with other people, but at least in this part of the game, it's bad. I don't like it, and you know what? Fuck this knight dude as well. You suck, and your sword is made out of cheap plastic.
Puyo Puyo Tetris.
We then get into Act 5, and treading back to the topic of the game having too many unimportant characters, at this point, they basically gave up on trying. Like, what's the deal with this fish guy? Couldn't tell you. Or how about this reject Chow? Beats me. What about this witch? This green demon girl? Or this thing? Don't know, don't care. And I don't know, maybe all of these random one-offs have some major role later on in the plot, but look at everyone we've seen up to now. Did all of these characters really need to be established that were being used very liberally because you do nothing, you're unimportant, you're in one scene, you're only salvaged by your voice actor, and S is still the goddamn worst? Also, any major events that happen later on don't do anything for me personally because this was the point where the difficulty became so much for me that I actually wasn't able to beat this act for the video, and the culprit was none other than this guy. Ekalo. My god, Ekalo brought me to my wit's end. Initially, I wasn't expecting him to be too much of a challenge. After all, it was a standard gimmick-free Tetris battle during the game's halfway point. How bad could it have been? Well, I may have spent a whole hour trying to beat him and failed every time. I don't know what level this character's AI is on or how different it is from the others, but for some reason, it's such a leap in difficulty. Despite all my efforts, this Chow was getting all the lines he needed, made tons of grade A business deals, and was perfectly countering every attack I performed. Just look at this one game. I probably have about 15-ish years of Tetris experience under my belt, and I'm starting to feel like all that time I spent playing this one stupid game has been wasted. The time I spent in high school playing this in English class and heckling my friends over terrible block placements they did, all for nothing it seems. And I'm sure there's some Tetris aficionado combing through my gameplay footage and putting together a CinemaSins-esque compilation of every rookie mistake I do. I know, Tetris isn't my strong suit, but I was trying my actual hardest, doing what I thought were strong setups in place, and it's insane to me that I was barely making a dent. I mean, look at the ending scores even. I had upped this dude on points by 5,000 each time, but somehow he was still kicking my ass. It also didn't help that practically every time Ekalo made a line, you hear him say, I think it goes without saying, but after playing this stage for 40 minutes non-stop, it gets really obnoxious and borderline maddening. Like, if I really wanted to cheat, I would not have spent as much time as I did on this one damn level. I'm starting to think I'm not the one who's cheating, dude. I'm really starting to think it's not me. Had the plot been stronger, I probably would have been able to muster through, but with no real payoff for completing the story mode challenges, any motivation I had left up to that point completely vanished. So overall, I can't say I'm a fan of Puyo Puyo Tetris' adventure mode, but that's not to say the game is bad altogether. In fact, I still hold it in a positive light. After all, when you look at other party games or just multiplayer games in general, their campaign modes usually range from slight to straight up non-existent. Because of this, I can't be too mad about the game's adventure mode. In fact, I actually respect the thought that was put into it. If you're a single player who wants to make the most out of Puyo Puyo Tetris though, I say skip the campaign and go straight to the solo arcade mode. When you get to control what modes you play instead of completing whatever the game slaps in front of you, it makes a surprisingly big difference. You don't have to sit through a nonsensical story, you can skip through some of the more annoying games, and if you want that super challenging match, it's your call. Plus, you can even do 4-player matches, which weren't available at my skill level in the adventure game. There are also single-player modes where you can spruce up your skills, try to get high scores, or what I ended up doing, make art out of Puyo pieces, like this Empire State Building, or this church, or this fighter jet, or stairs, which actually took me a while to figure out how to do that. And maybe someday my Puyo and Tetris skills will become better to the point where I'm willing to give the campaign another shot. I don't deny that possibility. For now though, the game's a decent time waster that I may boot up every now and again, but unless I'm playing with friends, Puyo Puyo Tetris isn't something I see myself becoming super invested in. But for the price I got it though, I think that's perfectly fine. Oh shoot, I completely forgot to mention the game mode that fuses Puyo and Tetris together.
Take this!
I guess it's alright.